Hey, friends, welcome to another episode of the Work Item Podcast. And what do you know? We have a wonderful guest today. Who would have guessed? Kenzie Dodds, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much, Dan. I am happy to be here.
I know your work from my days at Netlify when you were involved in a lot of the remix conversations. And I mean, you're still involved with remix. And maybe I want to start a little bit with your work as a developer. So, your tagline, if you will, is teaching people to write awesome software to make the world a better place. Very noble aspiration. Where did it all start? Like, what was that catalyst for you?
Yeah, first, I'd say that I think most people are trying to make the world a better place. I don't think I'm special in that way or anything. And most of us want to write quality software, I think. But I found for myself that I can maximize the value that I create by helping others to make quality software, and so they can go off and make their corner of the world better. And that's how I accomplish that mission. And so, yeah, where that started for me, I've always been teaching in my church. We were expected to teach in front of or present like short talks from the time we were like 4 years old in front of our peers and things. And then you're a teenager now, you're presenting in front of the congregation. And then I went on a 2-year mission, and so I'm talking and teaching people there. And so when I started, I pretty much just had a natural affinity for teaching. And so when I started getting into software development, it was pretty natural for me to start teaching my classmates. And then I graduated and found that I could actually do it on the side for extra money, and eventually made enough that I felt like I could do it full time and support my family that way. So yeah, it started when I was like 3 or 4.
That's uncommon because I don't know many 3 or 4-year-olds who would have said, you know what, that's when the public speaking and the teaching effort kind of was bootstrapped. But yeah. I think the analogy that you used in one of your introductory videos was being a torchbearer, that you help light other people's torches because, that way there's more light in the world. And I love that analogy because it truly speaks to your work as, you don't lose anything by teaching others, but others have a lot to gain from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting about that too is that the analogy kind of falls over, because when you light somebody else's torch, like eventually your torch is going to burn out. That's just the way that goes. I guess within the analogy that kind of works. Like we all die eventually, but not to get too morbid. But what's interesting though is in teaching, your knowledge actually solidifies further. And so that would be kind of like when you light somebody else's torch, not only does the room get generally brighter, but your torch somehow also gets brighter in the process. And so, yeah, I often have told people that teaching and like presenting at conferences and meetups and stuff is actually my way of my part of my learning process, and helping me solidify my understanding of whatever it is that I want to understand well.
And so what got you into the field of software development? Because again, it's, to me, in my mind, given kind of your current work, there had to be one point where you're like, all right, definitely this is what I want to build my career around.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started, well, when I was a teenager, I had a friend who was into software programming and things, and he tried to explain to me how it all works. I remember like he was sitting at my computer, and I guess he must have pulled up an editor or something, and he said, okay, so this is a number. He was teaching me data types. That was the first thing he went into. And I said, okay, I get numbers. And then he said, this is a Boolean, true and false. Okay, I guess that makes sense. And then he said, this is a string. And I could not get it at all. I was like, what a string? That doesn't make any sense. And so as a teenager, I was convinced that software programming probably wasn't my thing, but I did like computers a lot. And I got into video editing, and like I would make these little like anime music videos and like other things just for fun, and like videos with my friends. And I also was a blogger, and so I did a little bit of HTML and CSS, but I was really never one to be like, yeah, I want to be a programmer. I went into college thinking I wanted to be a video editor, but my brother convinced me to do electrical engineering, and he said, if you understand what the computer is doing, you can do anything with the computer. And I said, okay. And that first semester, I had 2 programming classes. I didn't really enjoy them very much, but I did fine. I wasn't like star student or anything, but I did pretty well in those classes. And then I went on a 2-year mission and came back and took a math refresher course, and I just bombed so bad. And so I realized, well, to be an engineer, you've got to be good at math, right? So I guess this isn't the path for me. I bounced around a little bit and finally found my way into information systems. And at the same time, I got into that because I thought like, oh, computers and business. I like computers and I like practical application of computers, like this works. And so I got an internship at a job that had me doing some really mundane computer related tasks. And as part of the information systems program, you have a programming class. And I was not like I wasn't like mad about it, but I wasn't enthusiastic about it at all. But because I was taking that class and I was also doing this mundane work on the computer, I realized that like I started thinking maybe I could apply some of the computer programming stuff to this task that I'm doing here at work. And so I wrote a Java program to automate a lot of my processes and stuff. To great effect. It worked out really well, and that was where it started to turn for me a little bit. It took me a while to come around to the idea of actually making programming a pursuit in itself rather than just a thing that I do to make my job easier. But that was where it started for me. That like, okay, I can actually write a software program that solves a real world problem. It's not just about making your own compiler or implementing a linked list or whatever. Like there's a real world problem that I can solve using programming, and that's what got me started on that.
Do you remember what was the first language where the strings were intimidating?
So my friend wrote C++. That's what we were.
Not the most beginner friendly.
Like, our goal was to make. If you've ever heard of RuneScape, this was like a big game back then. And like I didn't play it a lot, but I played a little bit with him. And so our idea was, let's make our own RuneScape, our own like game that massive online player game that we can just set running, and then people will play and pay us money, and we'll just make billions of dollars. And like all it takes is to write this software once, and we just send it out into the world, and now it makes us money. So that was the naivety there. But yeah, he wrote it all in C++.
Yeah, definitely not something that probably early on it's easy to click with. But it's interesting too that you called out the fact that you kind of navigated and jumped around in the IT field in itself, because typically when you talk to folks that are early in career, that are thinking about their careers, they think that, you had to have that innate ability from early on. You hear all these stories about somebody that like started at 7 years old and they wrote their first game and it became, it's like the next Mark Zuckerberg by the age of 16. And that path is not that common, but that doesn't necessarily preclude you from being successful. And this is what you just kind of described, where you went from kind of tinkering with programming, going to video editing, and then kind of back into programming. And then I am actually glad that things like math and early hardships did not discourage you, because there are so many folks that are encountering the exact same kind of firewall that you're describing of, well, I'm not good at math. That means I'm not going to be good at programming.
The math requirement is probably there for some parts of our industry, but definitely not all. The industry is just so big that it's very difficult to find a part of the software development industry that has a requirement on specifics, on like all the skills that you imagine. Like you see, we look at all the skills that every software developer has, and we think that's the requirement to being a software developer, but it actually is like just subsets of those things. And so if you are really good at math, like my nephew is a software developer, and he majored in math, and he's very good at math. And and he is in software, and he actually like has taken some of my courses and stuff. So like there is room for everybody in this industry, which I just think is super cool. So yeah, if you're not good at math, it's okay. Neither am I.
So you kind of alluded to that, that you are a prolific teacher. So you're teaching a bunch of different courses around kind of the JavaScript ecosystem. You're building workshops. It's a very unique aspect of your career that I think is, again, uncommon in our industry. Like there's a lot of engineers, a lot of product managers, a lot of designers, but not a lot of them that spend their time also helping others become better at that craft. So in your work, like how do you balance the demands of kind of creating this content for a very large audience, as well as kind of engaging with students and making sure that you get their feedback, you integrate it in your coursework, and then managing the rest of your career? Like, what's the trick?
Yeah, this was a lot trickier when I wasn't a full-time teacher. So I went full-time teaching in 2019, I think. So it's been a while now, but before that, I just did the teaching stuff on the side in the evenings. And yeah, that was tough. I'm married, and at the time I had 4 kids. I now have 5. And so yeah, it was a challenge. But working like the kids were really small, so we could put them to bed by like 7 or 8. And then my wife spent the whole day with the kids, and she was like, "I kind of want to be alone right now." And so we like I just went back to my office to do my education stuff. And so yeah, balancing that was difficult. And there were some times where I was really pushing for finishing a course or something, and so I'd spend more time, maybe 20 hours in a week, putting together the coursework after hours. And then other times it was not quite so strenuous, and I'd go a month or two without doing much. But then there are other things that I would do to kind of try and double dip in, as ethical a way as possible, where I would say, "Hey, boss, like I learned this interesting thing. Can I spend some time writing a blog post about it and share it with the coworkers?" And they say, "Yeah, sure." And so I put it on my blog, and now my blog has 200 blog posts on it. You do that every week, then yeah, that is 4 years of work if you do it every week. So yeah, so that was like it's one of those things where you just have to be really consistent, and yeah, work on that over time. And like you've got to put in the effort too. It, it it is a lot of work. And the reward is there though. Like if it's something that you enjoy and you're okay spending the first while not being very good at it, and actually working on that craft, then you can ultimately make the switch. That's what I did, at least, and it's worked out really well. So yeah, balancing things involves a lot of maybe not having the best balance, but being aware of those relationships that are most important and making sure they're taken care of. But also looking for opportunities to maximize the impact of the value that you're naturally creating as well.
I also really like your framing of consistency, because I think that's a prime example of the 10-year overnight success that everybody thinks, right?
Yes.
It's like, if only I can make this one video go viral, everything is going to pan out.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe for some people it does, but more often than not, it's that consistent work over many years that at some point flourishes into something better. And it seems like that's a prime example for you, where those blog posts, that content kind of accumulated over time. It was not all done in a week.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the overnight success where it goes viral and now I've made it, I don't have any actual data to back this up, but I would assume that somebody who is an overnight success like that, they either get really lucky and figure out how to continue working and delivering quality stuff, or they just fade into irrelevance because they got lucky and they didn't actually know how to be consistent and make consistently good stuff. In this industry, you cannot make a one-time thing that goes viral, get a huge following, and then keep that following engaged and useful for you in the long term. You have without doing anything else. Like you have to continue to deliver. and educate people and give them a reason to stay interested and committed to what you're doing. So yeah, even if you do manage to be overnight success, or like, you know, all of a sudden you get a viral video or something, you still have to figure it out anyway.
It's basically like the one hit wonders versus the artists that put out like consistent music over time and years and years and years, and you kind of hear about them more often. But
Mm-hmm.
also in your teaching career, so JavaScript is arguably one of the ecosystems that moves probably the fastest out of a lot of other languages. There's frameworks popping up, there's all sorts of new approaches to writing the code. How do you approach the challenge of keeping your educational content up to date? Because if things are changing so rapidly, like I bet at some point you're encountering situations like, all right, what I wrote like 3, 4, 5 months ago is now out of date. Now I need to redo this.
Yeah, that is a big challenge. And it's especially difficult with video content that requires an enormous amount of time and attention to create in the first place. And so if you have to redo that, it's just such an enormous pain. Um, but even written content too can be really difficult to keep up to date. So um, for one, I would say the first course that I ever made was about AngularJS and using JWTs for authentication, and that's still relevant to some people who are still in that world. And so just because there's a more modern way to do things doesn't mean that it's not useful to somebody who is still operating under code that was written back then. That said, yeah, you definitely you're not going to capture new audiences or people who are working on new projects or stuff with out of date stuff. And most people, that's because the industry moves so fast, they are looking for how relevant is this still? Like, are we doing things differently now? And with testing JavaScript, the first independent big course that I did when I was still at PayPal, there were quite a few changes that happened in that first year that I had to re-record a bunch of videos and make some improvements and things. And so I did in that the year after that was released, I did an update, and because yeah, things changed, and yeah, it's tough, but you got to do it if you want to still serve people. And then with Epic React, that I've been really fortunate that the React team takes backward compatibility very seriously, and breaking changes are just a huge thing for them. Not only the changes themselves, but breaking concepts as well. And so I released that after React Hooks was introduced, and that was the last big thing that is standard. Like the next big thing after that is React Server Components, and that's still a canary release thing. And so I don't feel like Epic React, even after over 3 years now, is out of date. It's still very much up to date. So I guess in that instance, I got a little lucky. That said, there are libraries and things that I use in the workshops that have had many changes and things. And so I've come to appreciate a little bit more stability, even though this API is named kind of funny. Nope, I don't care. I appreciate, everybody appreciates the stability. Even if it's not perfect, it's okay to just keep it stable for people. I learned that a lot on the Remix team as well. They are the same team that created React Router, and React Router has been extremely stable also. There was one pretty significant breaking change that people like to bring up, but outside of that, it's been 8 years and 1 or 2 breaking changes. So anyway, I, as an educator and as a software engineer, I definitely appreciate stability. But yeah, as far as keeping things up to date, it really just comes down to doing the work. I am right now in the midst of re-recording all of the Epic React videos to make them a part of Epic Web. And Epic Web, which I just released in October, there are a couple of things, they're not quite released yet, but soon will be released that will render some of my stuff a little out of date. And yeah, just got to plan on re-recording those things. My job is hard. It takes a lot of work. And actually, I should say also, there are other educators that offer a guarantee of like within 6 months of any breaking change, we'll update all of our stuff. Um, and I have decided not to do that. I know that's very appealing for people, um, but like I like to have my transactions with people be like transactional. So once you buy it, you get what you bought, and that's it. And that way, there's no expectation from you onto me that I will continue to offer anything more than what you bought. Which, if there were, then I would just be totally stressed and I wouldn't get anything done. Like even keeping things up to date, it would prevent me from producing the other stuff that is even more valuable, right? Like keeping, like, why keep this thing over here up to date when there's actually a completely different way that we do things that is way better now. And I want to teach you that way now. So I appreciate the value of that people want to have things kept up to date and everything. But I would rather, like, there's a balance there, and I'm not going to keep everything up to date. That's just the reality.
So there's that intentionality about investing in something that is inherently stable. So you know for yourself that this is not something I will need to reshuffle every few weeks because they decided to pull an API or introduce a new API. And then the second part is, I think it's the book publishing model, right? Like if you buy a first edition of a book, you don't automatically assume that you get all the future editions for free. Like you're not. Like you're going to pay for the new version of the book that has updated material, that has updated screenshots. And it sounds like you're applying the same model for your learning material as well.
I think of it as like, if you hire me to mow your lawn this week, I'll make it look amazing this week. And if you want it to look amazing next week, you're going to hire me for next week too. And it's a completely different service. There are people, there's also like subscription services and stuff. And I could see updates being a part of that. That would make a lot of sense if I did subscriptions. But there's just a really big part of me does not want expectations. I don't want people to expect things of me beyond what's on the page. When, like, here's what's available. I am selling you this shirt, and you cannot expect anything more than this shirt, but you don't expect any less, but you can't expect more. And there's no awkwardness between us. If I see you next week and you got a stain on the shirt, it's fine. Like, that is what it is. If you want a new shirt, you can come get a new shirt. Like, it just simplifies our relationship a great deal. And so, and it's not just like for business reasons and like I want to do a money grab or anything. For some people, here's the thing. Like today, React is very important to you. So you're going to buy Epic React. And if I said, okay, but I'm going to guarantee that things are kept up to date. Well, for that to be financially sustainable for me, I have to charge more for Epic React. And so you are paying an additional cost to get the promise of up-to-date material. Well, what if tomorrow you decide you don't care about React anymore, and now you're going into Svelte? Well, you paid all of this extra money so that you could get updates to a thing that you don't care about anymore. And so there's that angle of it too. It's absolutely not just because I want to charge people more money for the second edition. It's multifaceted.
I mean, it's scalability too, right? Like you're one person. Like there's only so many hours in a day. Like if you only focus on keeping everything up to date for a one-time fee, like that would get out of control extremely quickly. It seems like that would just not it. You would not have a course then.
Well, and what happens if I die? Or like what, my business partner is now on the hook, I guess, or what happens if I decide, React is really a bad framework and we should all be using something else? Like there are so many elements to this. And so I just don't want to make any promises for the future. I often will tell people like, here's what I'm planning on doing. Like I'm planning on releasing this new thing, or I'm planning on doing this. And I tell people that I plan on keeping the material up to date so that you can, in fact, the material was recorded with React 16, but if you go through the workshops now, you're using React 18. And so I have kept those up to date. But I always tell people that's a plan, not a promise. You're not buying that. You are buying exactly what it is as it is today. And then I do want to keep things up to date, and I do want to make myself available. So I have my office hours every week that are totally free for anybody, whether you bought the course or not. And all of these things are just totally free of expectation. If I decide I'm not doing office hours this week, then like you can't get mad at me because I never offered that. You didn't buy that. So yeah, it just simplifies things a lot.
Does it ever feel like a treadmill? Like, how do you avoid burnout? You're doing so many things.
You know, it is tough because I am in the midst of planning a conference right now as well. I did RemixConf 2 years in a row. RemixConf is no longer happening. It's now Epic WebConf. I can tell you this now because I'm pretty sure we're announcing tomorrow. So, but yeah, so it is. So I'm working on that. I also have like I was recording a series of videos for how I use AI as an assistant during my programming. That'll go on to epicweb.dev. I have 2 instructors that I am guiding to join to like start releasing stuff on epicweb.devs. They're working on their own workshops and things. And I've got other instructors that I'm hoping to get on board and stuff. I've got like 6 workshops that I have plans for that I'm going to be doing myself. So yes, your perception is right. I do have a lot that I'm doing. And then I have 5 kids and my wife and everything too. So yeah, and then also open source and all of that stuff. So a big part of it is learning how to learning where to apply the pressure and where to just take it easy. And so things, I don't typically put deadlines on things unless they really need to happen. So like an event like EpicConf, like that has a deadline, of course. And so I've got that, and we're working on, you know, like we just stay on the schedule and everything. And so because that has a deadline, it has a date, that becomes a priority whenever something needs to happen for that. For the 6 other workshops I've got, I have told people, you know, plan, not a promise, but these are the workshops that I'm hoping to work on. I haven't worked on any of those things for a couple weeks now because I've just got other things. When I've got like, it comes down to keep your commitments and don't overcommit. And that's how you avoid burnout. I got pretty close with the launch of Epic Web because I don't typically put a deadline on launches of courses and things, but my wife and I were expecting our 5th child, and I needed to release this before the baby came. And so there was a pretty, maybe not a deadline, we call that a birth line, but yeah, I had to get that done. So if on my blog, I wrote a post that kind of describes the story of how I got all of Epic Web put together, and it was pretty outrageous, just the amount of time I spent working on getting that launched. So, but for the most part, it comes down to getting familiar with the amount of time a commitment takes and not overcommitting.
You made kind of the transition from more traditional employment to being, I want to say, like an entrepreneur. You are an entrepreneur. What factors influenced that decision? Like, what was that kind of breaking point, and how has it really impacted your, let's say, like, both autonomy and creative freedom? Because I'm assuming now you can do a lot more.
Yeah. So before I went full-time educator and on my own, I was working at PayPal. Before that, I was at a small company around here called Alianza. Before that, it was at Task, which is now Workfront, and then before that was Domo. So through all of that time, I was doing stuff on the side. I think I incorporated my business probably when I was at Alianza. Because I was already making income on these courses and stuff. And so I realized I should probably like separate my business stuff from my personal stuff for tax reasons and liability and all that. And so so I have been an entrepreneur for quite a while. But I think what you're more interested in is how we made the transition from full-time employee to full-time self-employed. And I think what made me comfortable with the leap was that I had been doing this on the side for so long, and I like I was an international speaker and people wanted to hear what I had to say. They would like read my blog post, they would share that stuff, and they would actually give me money for workshops and stuff. And ultimately what happened was I launched testing JavaScript while I was still at PayPal, and that made me more money than my PayPal salary did. And so I realized, well, I don't need 2 PayPal salaries. I'm doing just fine with one. So I would rather spend more time with my kids at night, like as they're getting older and stuff too. I'd rather spend more time with them. And so if I do all the teaching stuff during the day, then I can have like more time with them. So that was what factored in. I realized that's a really privileged position to be in. I was very, very blessed to have that opportunity to be so certain of myself at that point. But that's what it took for me to go full-time educator, was that consistent, like I think I'd been doing it for 6 years already, consistent content production until I get to the point where I'm like, there's no way that this is going to go badly for me because it's already going so well. And so that was how I made that leap to full-time educator.
So you had that early validation that what you're building is actually valuable. And then by the time that leap actually happened, it's not like you're going in, blindfolded where you don't know how this is going to pan out. It's like, no, it's actually going well. It's just going to continue as long as you bring the same consistency that you brought before.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was less of a leap and more of a step. And so I think that it really does come down to that consistency of just doing it for a long time. There's the law of the harvest. What you sow is what you reap, and so it does take just an enormous amount of work. Like I'll be the first to say, yeah, I'm really privileged to have a lot of really awesome opportunities, and from the time I was very young. But even with that, I worked my butt off, and I got rewarded for that. And so that's it. Like if that's something, whoever is listening, if that's something you want, just know you can have it. It just takes a ton of work, and it might take more work for you than it did for me, depending on where you're standing in the privilege world. But it can be done. And it does take a lot of work though.
For building that authority in kind of the tech community, like it takes a lot of time. And like arguably you've been in the community, you've been in the open source project for quite a bit of time now, and you've built up that authority. Were there any deliberate steps that you took to kind of establish yourself as a trusted expert in JavaScript and Remix and everything surrounding it?
Early on, no, I didn't really I wasn't very intentional about how I presented myself online. And then eventually I started developing a following just naturally because of the content I was producing and stuff. And I realized that I think it was around the time that I got my job at PayPal through Twitter, a Twitter conversation. And I realized, oh man, like this, getting a following and not just the following, but the respect and recognition from the broader world is actually job security. Because if you decide, hey, I'm at a job, I don't really like it very much, I want to work somewhere else, then it's way easier to find a job if people know who you are. So like people will sometimes say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But that's actually wrong. It's not who you know, it's who knows you and what they know about you. And so being well known is actually a very strong form of job security. At least it was for me. And so, I spent I still haven't been super intentional about like building a following. I never did any of those growth hacks. Well, I may have toyed around with it just to be silly, but I never really actually like tried to do those silly developer questions that just try to get eyeballs and stuff. That just never really captured me. I've like once or twice done the YouTube thumbnail with the like open mouth thing, mostly to be sarcastic. And so, I haven't really been super intentional about that. But what I have been very intentional about was the following that that actually really matters, and that is my mailing list. That mailing list is when it comes to you have something you want to sell, that mailing list matters a huge deal. And I actually need to do better about treating my mailing list better. I recently listened to a book called This is Personal by Brennan something. But it's about email marketing and how to, communicate with your audience in a way that's like not bad marketer, but like actually useful to your audience and stuff. But anyway, the mailing list has been really critical, and I have been pretty intentional about growing that and fostering a really good, that was a big part of actually why I started blogging every week, was so I had something to send the mailing list. But yeah, as far as growing Twitter or X as it is now, and YouTube following and stuff, that does matter to me because it makes an actual impact on the level of reach I can make. But I haven't been super intentional about growing that.
I think it came with expertise because people kind of see you as somebody that knows their stuff. They trust you to know your stuff and continue knowing that stuff and teaching them about it. But to me, the part that stood out to you is what kind of you alluded to, and that is effectively what folks refer to as like a career moat. The thing that kind of sets you apart from literally everyone else in your industry. And it sounds like for you, that is this community and the community awareness. And the analogy that I had in one of the previous episodes was that a career moat is not something that can keep your current job secure. It's what will get you that next job. Like if you get fired, if you get laid off, how easy for you will it be to go find that next job after that event occurs? And in your case, like that community is basically that catalyst or that career moat to help you move into the next stage, shall the opportunity arise.
Yeah, I think that's important to keep in mind, is that when you're employed, that situation can change very easily, at least in the United States. And so, yeah, keeping that in mind. And at this stage for me, the thing that is most important to me is that I am highly regarded as an expert in my field, so that when I have something to share that is behind a paywall, people are willing to put up the money because they trust that I know what I'm talking about. And of course, like we do a money back guarantee and all that stuff, like if people aren't satisfied with it, but people aren't willing, they're not just putting up their money, they're putting up their time, and you can't guarantee their time. Like you can't give that back if it's not well spent. So you do have to have a degree of interest and trust. And so that's the most important part about the following to me.
The last or before last question that I have for this show is something that I ask of all the guests, and that is, for folks that are listening to this, if you would give them an unconventional piece of advice, that is something that you've learned in your career, your journey, based on your experience, that you'd say is something that folks need to keep in mind as they progress in the tech scene, as they want to break into the tech scene, what would that be from you?
So what I always say, like my very best advice is to be a kind person. I don't know if I would say this is unconventional necessarily. Maybe a lot of people say this. But of everything that I have experienced in my career, nothing has been more impactful than me trying to be a kind person. And nothing has made me less likely to want to work with somebody as them being not a kind person. And so you can be the best programmer in the world, but if nobody, well, first of all, if nobody knows, then that doesn't matter. So communicating is also very important. But if even if everybody knows you're the best and you know that you're the best and you're a jerk about it, then I don't care how good you are. I don't want to work with you. I'd rather work with somebody else, even if they're not as good as you are. And so being nice is cannot be overstated on how important that is, at least for me. So if, yeah, like be thoughtful, make sure to give credit where it's due, be the kind of person that other people want to work with, and they will give you opportunities. I have countless experiences in my life where somebody gave me an opportunity and they only thought about me because they didn't hate me. Like they actually were interested in working with me. So yeah, be nice is my advice.
Wonderful advice to wrap the show on. We'll include links to all your courses in the show notes, but if there's any resources where folks can learn more about what you're building, where should they go?
The best place is epicweb.dev, where I want to make you an epic web dev.
Excellent. epicweb.dev. Make sure to check it out. Ken, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insights.
Thank you, Dan. It was nice chatting with you.